We are going to record this session, and we will not be recording the breakouts, just so you know, but we're recording so that um, people who aren't able to be here can at least get some of the content because this is a conversation that could go on obviously for hours, but we're only blessed with an hour this morning or this evening, depending on where you're calling in from. And so I thank you all for joining us. My name is Linda Parker Pennington, or LPP. I'm just going to spend a minute just to talk about the journey so far and where we are at this point in time, and then introduce our two wonderful sages who are going to get us started talking about this conversation. And I wanted to, and then we'll be going into breakouts, and we hope that you will stay with us. This is intended to be a highly interactive discussion. We're all on a path of learning how to navigate our organizations, whether corporations, nonprofits, educational institutions, NGOs, or startup companies. We're all figuring out our culture, defining the culture, and how to navigate within that culture if we're within a system. And so I know that we've all had some our own experiences with that. So the topic today is navigating the corporate waters from racism to ageism, and obviously there are other isms that will come into the conversation, but we'll focus on those two this morning. I just want to take a minute tell you about MEA, the Modern Elder Academy. For those of you who may not be familiar and are joining this the first time, I encourage you to look them up, and maybe Shelby, you can put in the chat a link to the MEA webpage for folks. MEA is a wisdom institute. It's a academy that was founded in 2018 by Chip Conley, Christine Sperber, and Jeff Hamui. And its main location is in Baja Sur, Mexico. And there's a new campus, two new campuses being set up in Santa Fe and New Mexico, and it's been expanding rapidly. So I have been blessed with the opportunity to go through twice. I went through the week in Baja in the very second cohort. I think there have been about 60 now in the last 4 years, and my group is called Soul Train. And so then I went through again this year in February with the Helicans. There's a backstory on both those, but we won't go into that now. You can ask me offline. And I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn if you want to reach out to me personally. I love to connect with folks. So with that brief introduction, I will say in the week of October 9th through 16th, there will be 25 people of African descent in Baja, descending on Baja, as it were, in Pescadero and the MEA campus. And we will have our inaugural or beta Modern Elder, Black Modern Elder Week. Chip did 13 betas to get to the launch of the Modern Elder Academy to refine the curriculum. I think Wanda Whitaker, who's on the Zoom, was in beta 0 or 1. And so there were 13 of those. So to get to November 2018, the actual launch. And so this is our beta for Black Modern Elders, which means that everyone who's there and on the path to getting there for this week in October will be helping us define and refine the curriculum that is Afrocentric, that brings us into an understanding of who we are as people of African descent, to reclaim our power, tell our stories, and share our voices, and draw on the resilience that is about who we are as people of African descent. So I really appreciate MEA for helping us, first of all, Chip Conley for sponsoring this week, and to MEA for all the support they have given us, the staff, which has been considerable to get to this week during these insane times that we're in. So the context is a little crazy. So I really appreciate everybody stepping up and stepping in. So today, this conversation today, the topic really spawned from conversation that I was having with Maeve Richard and Paula McLean several weeks ago. And Maeve said that it would be great to help Black people in the corporate world with all the issues of navigating and understanding and all that. And my reaction was a little odd, but I guess in the moment I was saying, "Oh, the week is about by, for, and about Black people." And then afterwards I said, "Well, you know what? Black people are in the corporate world. They're in these institutions, and they're trying to figure this out." And I think we can help us get together and have this conversation with one another in a safe space. And we even are reframing this to a brave space, meaning that we're hoping people will feel encouraged and inspired to share their own personal stories, because we learn so much from each other's experiences. So this is a learning laboratory. And Greg and Maeve will kind of start us off, and I'll have some key questions for them to start us off, and then I invite others to weigh in, and then in the small group breakouts, we will continue and deepen the conversation, and then we'll come back together as a group, see what some ahas are in the moment, and then we'll close. And so if you have not looked at the webpage for the October week, I encourage you to do that. And there is a recording on my LinkedIn page of me and Chip Conley just talking more about the Modern Elder Academy and what's behind the Black Modern Elder Week, if you'd like to grab that recording too. So with that, I am going to admit Baba Ted March, and I would like to turn it over first to Maeve Richard to introduce herself, and then Greg, you can follow her up. Thanks.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be here. It's kind of exciting to see all of you join. It's an interesting topic, and I want to start with an introduction. It's not my value proposition, but instead, I want to share about my beginnings. So I was born in Chicago to two mixed race parents. And they were in Chicago because when they came together, they lived in the South, and that was kind of a dangerous thing to do. So when I look back on that time, segregation was in place. The Civil Rights Act had not been passed. And my father was a dining car waiter. My uncle was a doorman at a really lovely hotel in Detroit, and my grandfather was a conductor. And that was pretty phenomenal and amazing because they were able to work. But yet, when I was a child in primary school, it was something I was a little embarrassed by, to admit that my family was part of the hospitality industry, and yet we were not part of that hospitality. When I was 8 years old, a few days before Christmas, my father just fell over dead while waiting tables, and he was buried on my 9th birthday, which left my mother raising 3 children and her 2 stepsons. And so when I looked around and reflected, I started to realize, even in my family, I found myself an only one, an only girl. And I knew my mother's side. I did not know my father's side. But on my mother's side, it just seemed like there were only boys. So I had a slew of boy cousins, and the only girl in this family of all these boys. And yet my role was to be of service to them. And I felt that was pretty inequitable because there were a lot of them and it was just me. My mother encouraged me and others, all of us though, to get an education. That was really important to her. And I looked at her and I thought, wow, her life is tough. And I didn't want to be a burden to her. And so I went out and I got that education, which took me to UC Berkeley, and then luckily allowed me to associate with some people. I had no network, I had no guidance. We had it pretty tough. But I ended up in a job where I sort of eavesdropped on other conversations and learned there was something called business school. Ended up at Stanford Business School, which was pretty amazing because I met my husband and I accomplished the primary goal in life that I am so delighted by. I'm a mother of 3 children. All I did though is I wanted to travel. Maybe it was good my father was a dining car waiter and my grandfather was a conductor, because I wanted to see the world. That was my primary motivation. And it fueled me through all kinds of, real challenges. And I ended up in this elitist institution, which opened doors to more elitist institutions. I started my career at JP Morgan at 23 Wall Street. And so after that, I figured, hey, it worked the first time to listen in on conversations and make some choices. And I continued doing it. Ended up at a series of big brand names because they attracted me. I thought, if these are good, it must be really good. And I want in. So it was Levi Strauss & Co. It was Sun Microsystems. It was McAfee. And then I decided, what I love is change. And I did a series of CFO, COO jobs for small, agile companies that usually had CEOs that I had major value dissonance with. Ended up pivoting ultimately into career development and most recently, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's my story. That's my introduction.
Thank you. And Greg, I think you might still be muted.
I think you can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's a pleasure to be here, everyone. I see a few familiar names and some that are new, so it's a pleasure to meet all of you. I'll share a little bit of my background as well. So I live in San Francisco now, which is a traditional land and unceded territory of the Ramaytush people. So here we are now. But I was born in Washington, D.C., and I was born to parents who were Black, but my father had a mixed race family prior to my family. So I have a half brother who is 20 years older than I am, and his mother was white. And so, and that was in the South also, sort of similar to Maeve's story. That was in the South in the well, my brother was born in, I guess, in the 1940s. So that was an interesting experience, a difficult experience for them. And they moved to Washington, D.C. in the 40s, but my father would tell stories of driving back down to Texas and having to put his son in the back seat of the car because it would not be okay to say, this is my son. Anyway, so I grew up also often being one of the few or the only one as I moved through life as a Black person. We were in an integrated neighborhood. We went to integrated schools, especially in the early years, and then I went to schools that were predominantly white. We had an integrated church that was in a location that was predominantly Black, so I had some mixture. And along the way, that brought up many questions of what it meant to integrate myself into those communities. So then, when I was 10 years old, my class, we had an African American Studies class, and our teacher took us to the National Archives to see Birth of a Nation. So that was eye-opening. That whole experience with that teacher was eye-opening. But that was an eye-opening movie. It just seemed like there was something that's fallen apart in this culture to have gotten to a place where something like that movie could be made. Meanwhile, the Vietnam War was going on. And so once again, and in those days, for those of you who aren't of a certain age, that war was on television in a way that's unlike anything we see today. Often it was ground fighting too. So you're right there at the dinner table, possibly watching people being shot, watching bombs being dropped on a regular basis. And so for me as a child, I could only look at that and say, well, once again, there's been a breakdown. There's something about people not being able to connect with each other, not being able to build those bridges that need to be built because there are these tragic things happening. So that made a big impression on me. And I think that fast forward, I'm thinking about what I want to do with my career. So I had heard of business school, but in my family, the good jobs were doctor, lawyer, teacher. Those were the good jobs. And so there was definitely a lot of sense that you want to do that. If you wanted to be an artist, no. If you wanted, my father actually played piano and had a professional career when he was very young, and then moved into academia. He ended up being a professor at Howard University. So and had he loved that, and sometimes had some regret about leaving behind the music world. So in my world, doctor, lawyer, teacher, I went to college, majored in economics, and thought I want to go to business school. And I remember that my father thought that was a really almost a failure for me to do that until one of his students one of his students who had gone on to become a successful dentist said, this is something that's actually something that is a reasonable thing to do. And the former student bought me a subscription to the Wall Street Journal. I should have known there was an issue when I would read that Wall Street Journal only for the non-business news. So anyway, here we are. I had a lot of suspicions about the corporate world. I still have a lot of suspicions. I was coming of age in the Reagan era. And so you may remember the movie Wall Street and the phrase greed is good, and the way that in certain way exemplified what was happening back then. I mean, I remember being in college, about a sophomore year in college, and I remember my sister calling me, I'm in New Jersey, she's in DC, calling me and almost whispering, Greg, there are people sleeping on the street in a way that we had never seen before. And so people say now, oh, it wasn't such a market difference, but I remember that. So I had a lot of suspicion about how, as an economics major, and how that economics world, how our economic model contributed to where we ended up. So all of that was on my mind, and I thought in going to business school that maybe I could offer a different perspective. Once I got there, I went into a more traditional business job, found that I was more interested in the people than the products. And then that's what led me back to where I'd started, to feeling that what I wanted to do was to go back to that bridge building and understand that more deeply, practice that more deeply, and think of that as a possible way that I could contribute. And so now my world is, I practice, I'm a consultant in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And here we are. So again, pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it. I feel like I need to give you a title or a new name to distinguish you from the other Gregs in the world and in this program. But for now, I'm going to jump into a few questions before we go into breakout, just to get us started. And you can do these in any order that you're so moved. And also, if anyone on the call would like to be unmuted because they have something they'd also like to say and it's burning, you're welcome to do that. We don't have to be too formal about this. So my first question is, so how have each of you navigated being the only one or one of a few in the business organizations where you've found yourself?
Maeve, do you want to go first? I'm happy to start, or either way. Okay. Yeah, I'll share just a few thoughts. As you said, Linda, these are huge questions, but I'll share what comes to mind for me. I don't want myself or any of us to be defined by our so-called race. I don't like the lie of race. And so, and at the same time, there is a reality that we have a social construct that we call race, and that there are ways in which certainly others are going to define us by how they see our race. And at least for me, there are ways in which I've defined myself, what's possible, what's not possible, why I do things, et cetera, by race. And I guess all I could really offer here is that my approach, which is something that is, continuing to, I'm hoping to blossom. I don't think I could do this when I was a kid. Maybe I can do it a little better now, is just to go toward that discomfort there, just to be more conscious about those dynamics of how I am seen, how I might be othered, how I might other myself, how I might, the data says I am probably othering other Black people too. That's what is going to be often happening under the surface. So how can I be more conscious of all of that? And by doing that, to somehow transcend it. So I'm just trying to get close to those dynamics. That means quieting myself. It means looking within. It means doing that with the greatest courage I have in that moment, which is hit or miss on a given day. And I think when I see that I'm one of the few, not marginalizing myself in any way because of that, meaning that when I'm one of the few, I think sometimes I may impose on myself a sense of the burden that there might be there. And if I do that, then I think about, if you're familiar with the teacher Bayo Akomolafe, he talks about what he calls tricarceration. And so the which I cannot fully represent, but the idea is that we can incarcerate ourselves in ways that we may or may not be aware of. So how can I be aware of where I might be doing that, and just invite myself to stick with it, stay resilient, and stick with looking at any of that tricarceration.
Well, I think the good news is one thing that God blessed me with was a sense of humor. So for a good portion of when I look at my entire corporate career, even that shape, I spent a lot of time going up learning curves, and I love the going up. And I almost think the issue of being an only one varies depending on where you are as you slope up. And so when I was junior and fiery and worked really hard and all of this, and was pretty oblivious about the fact that I was a person of color, I think I was also, I didn't want to recognize that there were challenges. I believed it should not matter. I wanted the world to be fair, and I could get pretty fired up about that. But quickly I recognized there were politics, and politics mattered. But even so, because I wanted to compete, I thought winning mattered. And I needed to do, as long as it did not compromise my values, I would do what was asked of me. And so I usually excelled and was promoted and encouraged. Once the curve starts to sort of flatten, which usually means you're in a position of authority and power, I started realizing that I wasn't moving as rapidly as my peers. And so it became less humorous that when I walked into a room or when I sat down around the table and faced off against a lot of white men, that I was an only one. And I began to feel the burden of being alone, without counsel, without advice, which only in a good way built up a lot of resilience and resolve in me. So far, I don't think I was damaged, or in no way did I feel diminished. But I started, I was always chasing new experiences. And so then when I got into sort of more C-level roles, or when I wanted to move into the C-level to be accepted, I really began to feel the only one of being the woman in the room. And then when I got into the real C-level role, where usually, and I mean, I'm also a contrarian or a dissenter. People would say staff isn't important. I would say, yes, it is. And so I kind of decided I wanted to specialize in staff. And I looked for these opportunities to come in and just, I called it implementing right-sized infrastructure. And I would come in and I would build all the back office functions, HR, IT, and I would say, in your face, we're just as valuable. You need to respect us as well as everyone else. The P&L, you wouldn't have a P&L unless we were there helping make it happen. We add value. So I was a little feisty and defiant, but that's when I started to feel kind of beaten down too. Part of the issue is this identity as only one, and feeling proud and feeling good about it kind of morphed into feeling battered and beat up often, because the other aspect of being the only one is, as this Black woman with dealing a lot with white men, I would end up encountering their egos and the power that they wielded. And the power that I relied on was fast processing, the ability to outthink them. And that was not a good strategy. So kind of we're at a point where I'm beginning to decline in terms of my self-worth, my self-esteem, because over time, the fact that I was alone, I was braving it and I was toughing it on my own. There were very few people there at those levels to recognize and appreciate my contributions. And even, going toe to toe or eye to eye with a CEO can result in some things that probably weren't going for. So I remember at one point I'd spent 3 years, it was the best work I ever done, but there was too much friction between me and the CEO. And at some point he says, well, thanks so much. But I'm in charge. And and you're not. So, and that was interesting. You can imagine, I'm not going to finish that story. So that's kind of a glimpse into my experience as an only one.
That's thank you, Maeve and Greg. It's really powerful, and I suspect all of us can relate to that feeling of, first of all, the weight of doing this, on your psyche and your sense of self-worth. So it actually leads right into my second question here, and that's, how do you resource yourself to remain resilient and achieve your goals and you manifest your purpose, while you're navigating all of this, whether you're actually inside the corporate world or outside and marketing to, corporations and businesses.
Well, I can take that on. I feel like I've been uh, trying to sort that out, figure that out for the last 10 years, even longer than that. I had a delayed start in really caring about that. So when I went to business school, and I got to travel, I loved all the travel I did. I loved the companies and their expense accounts. It was fabulous. So I managed to do a ton of that. But I don't think I was ever very satisfied or fulfilled doing what I was asked to do. The corporate goals, I loved setting them, I loved meeting them, but it was all about shareholder value creation. And I started to look at this system, and I keep referring to these value differences. At a point in time, they were overwhelming. You know, I identify with the underdog, the marginalized, the disenfranchised. Those are not necessarily the stakeholders that these large multinational corporate are most concerned with. And so what it kind of forced me to do was ask myself, why am I on this earth? Is it to create shareholder value? And I don't even agree with it. And not that I think what had also happened was I had ended up, all of these efforts, all of these investments had cost me. And there was very little of me left. And I had to spend a couple of years reacquainting myself with myself, what I cared about, what I wanted, what really mattered to me. And so I began to search for purpose. And that was good. I tried, I went out and I read books and I talked to a lot of people and whatever, and it didn't really work that way. But I kind of began to just go with my gut and fall into things. So, somehow ending up, and I believe in serendipity and happenstance because it offers up opportunities. And if you're looking out, you see those and they glisten and you move toward them. And so, yes, over time, I really do believe, lo and behold, I am clear now about a purpose. It is not, I couldn't find it in a book, or it didn't really help me, but I ended up in a place where I believe fundamentally I'm living out my purpose. And part of that is recognizing that the world around me will do well and do better if I have clarity of purpose, if I am responsible to that, and if I am a decent individual or honest in terms of me, myself, and I. So this, it's, to me, it's very powerful because by living my purpose, my focus becomes what I truly can control and what really matters to me. And when that is the focus, the thing that I've experienced is kind of S curve of innovation. It is renewing, it is refreshing, it is fulfilling, and I am experiencing big impact. And that satisfies me. That fulfills me. So I'd like to think that this is my past pattern was achieving a goal and saying, okay, where's the next goal? Now I definitely feel, and this has a lot to do with my age. I feel like it's all about identifying a source or a flow and flowing with it. And it's gracious and it's good. I'm mellowing, which is nice. and I'm feeling good about who I am. And as opposed to what the environment is telling me, which is you have no value. We're not going to hire you to do that. I've probably was given, even I think I was given more options than many of you because I wanted them and I went and pursued them, but maybe I had 15. I only have 1 or 2 more. So I am not squandering them. This is about me being true to me and the world, my family, everyone benefiting.
Well, so that is so powerful. And what I'm going to do is I have just one more question. So I'm going to lob this last question to Greg. And maybe you can weigh in, and others can weigh in as well, because this is kind of a big question. So it's what reflections, suggestions, and recommendations can you share to those who are going through this journey? Including, and I want to make sure that we include the aspect of aging and saging, which is, our way of expressing the wisdom that flows. And I think that you said it very well in your last comments, Maeve, about getting to a flow and really tapping into that source that allows you to stay on purpose, right? And very intentional about the next moves you make and how you do them and how you stay true to yourself. So I want to ask Greg to take that on and talk also about the wisdom of saging that comes in and how you've used that to your own advantage.
Thanks, Linda. I find myself, as I think about this question, actually, I find myself in a certain way. I think this will be a combination of an answer to this question as well as the previous question, because in some ways, the answer, there's a lot of overlap there. So I'm just going to sort of share, and we'll see where this goes. I took some notes that I think relate to this. But I want to go back to something that Maeve talked about. She talked about values and values of the corporate world, the prevailing values there. And so I think what was interesting for me, and what was, I guess, for me, was the challenge was that I went toward this place where I had suspicion of the values. And then when I got there, well, I mean, I'm one person. This is a big system here. And so I am now immersed in this system. So it's hard to be there. It's draining. And there were many times when I felt that I'm going to use the word self-esteem deliberately here. When my self-esteem was undermined by the mere fact that I was there, I sometimes felt like a failure just for being there. And that was not a helpful way for me to see it, but that's how I saw it. And so I just want to say that one of the things that's happened to me with age and just with learning and exposure is to have suspicion of this concept of self-esteem. So without going into detail there, let's invite ourselves to remember that when we're talking about self-esteem, when you really pull that apart, a lot of self-esteem is about finding a way to see ourselves as special and essentially separate from the group. And also it's about having to be better than average. And if we're invested in that, if I'm invested in that, let's say it that way, if I'm invested in that, then I'm ultimately going to diminish myself. So I've had to learn that. And so that's given me a little bit of resilience. I've also found that over time, I've had, I could say I'm more grateful now for things in my life, or I could just say I've learned to be a little bit grateful. So I don't know that I was that grateful for a lot of my time growing up, frankly. But that's been a practice. So just practicing the gratitude is something that's come to me for whatever reasons now in these more advanced years than greater than it did before. Grateful for things that I maybe didn't even like before. Just trying to find the way to be grateful for everything. I mean, even that corporate world enabled me. I mean, I had a mentor who said, Greg, what you're going to need is to have a mission that's bigger than your fears. And I think in a sense, when I hear her now, I think she was saying a mission bigger than your fears and bigger than the sorrows that you're carrying. And when you find that, which I think is much of what Maeve was talking about as well, when you find that, you're never alone in some way. And so that's what's, I can now have gratitude for that corporate world. When I was in the traditional corporate world, I'm still serving the corporate world in many ways. When I was in the midst of that, I think I can look back and say that that work literally enabled me, even going through classes I took in that corporate world, enabled me to hone that vision that I had of, okay, I don't like these values. Maybe I can represent a different set of values and ultimately go toward and really claim my commitment to build community, thinking back to the war, thinking back to those challenges that I saw in the 60s and 70s. My commitment to community and love is what I have to offer, but I need to keep learning how to offer that and learn what it means for me and expand my vision of that. But the community and love are still the calling cards that have been, the universe has given to me. Now, how do I follow that? And on some level, I believe that is the inherent deal with being here, is to go deeply in that direction in the ways that we can, in the journeys that we're on. But through that, that's where I found my joy and fulfillment. And that word fulfillment, I remember once upon a time I didn't know that word. I didn't know it in a way where I could look at career and think of career as fulfillment. Doctor, lawyer, teacher. You wanted practical work. My mom took a job the Monday after she graduated from college, and she essentially kept the same, she worked for the same organization in mostly the same job for her entire career. And that was a model that was common back then. And that's the model that I probably sought. So I didn't think about fulfillment at that time. I thought fulfillment was something you do on your spare time away from work. And so I had to integrate all of that. And that's another thing that's been a journey that continues with age. So those are some of the themes that come up for me there, Linda.
Oh, thank you for those words, Greg. So powerful. And so I want to, because of where we are now, I want to go into breakouts. Really, I'm happy people are back, and I think it would be nice to do a quick, maybe one or two folks do a popcorn on, what was it? We call it a Baja Aha, but they'll have to come up with something else for the folks that are going to be going through Santa Fe. But when we start our mornings and we reflect on the day before, we call it Baja Aha. What was the thing that struck us, our epiphany. So I'm just wondering if there's anyone who would like to unmute and talk about an epiphany briefly. And I cannot see. I have to put myself in gallery view because I can't see everybody. And I guess you could use the hand raise function if you want. Because I feel like I could call on people, which would be, who wants to say something? Oh, Mark. Yes.
Yeah, hey, there's not many of us here, so sorry I joined late, folks, but it was really nice discussion that I heard before breakout, and I really enjoyed my breakout session. So thank you very much. I think, the piece that I just got is recognizing impact. And sometimes it's hard to know the influence and the change that we have in the world. And I think it's important to recognize. And Greg was talking about this and was in my breakout session about self-esteem. And that's, I think, a piece of self-esteem is recognizing who we are and the contributions that we make. And the reach that we have, and all of us through our years, however old we are in whatever field, I think especially those drawn to work like we're doing in MEA have propensity for significant impact in others' worlds. Enough for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the taking advantage of the brave space and sharing your voice. And I was really also curious about someone who's not Black, since a lot of the focus was on race as a factor, but obviously most of us, with the exception of Shelby, are in the elder category. So, and then is there anyone else who'd like to express something? Because if not, I'm actually going to give Paula Pretlow a moment in the sun here to talk about, and I want to thank Paula for joining us. She's three day, a week or so from her daughter's wedding. So if anyone has ever, had a child get married and orchestrated that, you feel, her pain and joy. It's totally a blessing. So thank you for joining us, Paula. And I just wanted to let you talk a bit about navigating all the way to the boardroom, or what it feels like to be the only one in the boardroom.
And Linda, if there's a moment, I see Baba Ted has his hand raised also. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, then I'm
Why
going
don't
to
we
Baba
allow
Ted.
Baba Ted to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Now I see the hand. Thank you, Baba. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to share one aha moment I had while I was in corporate, and I was at my very first division head meeting at the major corporation, the largest corporation at the time. And we had just implemented a merit reward system for our salespeople. And we had just gotten the first quarter results. And so here I am in this division meeting, and one of the senior division managers said, we just got the first quarter results and the wrong people are at the top. And that just hit me like a sledgehammer in terms of the political, social environment that I found myself in. And as I put in the chat space, is unconsciously I became an antagonist as my personal values started bumping up against the corporate headquarters operating values. And so I began a slow descent into self-sabotaging, fighting the system, and the system rewarded me accordingly. So I just wanted to share that piece. I'm complete.
Thank you, Baba Ted. I appreciate it. And I'm going to say, because we're right up on top of the hour, and if this is, if your day is like everyone else's tends to be, there's another meeting right behind. So Paula has graciously offered to not say anything, but we're going to pick you up on that in another wisdom circle, Paula Pretlow. Okay, I appreciate it. And I just wanted to say, a huge thank you. Thank you, Shelby, for being the wizard behind the curtain and doing all the Zoom stuff. And thank you, everyone, for your voice and contributing and your attention and intentionality in showing up today. And I really look forward to those of you who can join us and will join us in Baja in October, and know that it's a beta, and there will be more. But we don't know when it'll land, but it'll be on the schedule in the future. And then we'll also have other wisdom circles on different topics. And I appreciate you all for joining us, and I hope it was worth your time this morning. Thank you so much. And you'll get the recording as well, and you can share it with anyone you think would benefit from this conversation. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Linda.